Well, good morning. Welcome to day 2 of the International Open RAN Symposium. This is the technical track. If you are out of place and are looking for policy, now's your chance to escape. But with that said, we do not have a hard and fast rule. So you're in the technical track to begin with, great. If you want to go attend some policy track sessions, please feel free to hop back and forth. Again, my name is Jeremy Glenn. I'll be your MC again. Nobody kicked me out yesterday, so I'm back, and we'll see how this goes. I'm going to give some introductory remarks to our interactive workshops. So I'll describe how those are going to go today, where you're going to go, and get us kicked off in the next 15 minutes. Once again, I want to welcome our virtual audience. We have about 120 that are attending IORS, and I'm not sure how many are here in the technical track versus policy track next door, but welcome and thanks for joining us. At the end of the day, we will hear a summary of the policy track. So we are going to be in separate tracks all day, but one of the discussion leaders, I think Kate Dimsdale, is going to come over here and give us a summary of the policy discussions. And then a discussion leader over here, I believe Julie Cubb, will go over there and give a quick summary. So that'll be the wrap up at the end of the day. So it'll be nice to hear a little bit from the other side about how their discussions went. All right, so first for a brief introduction for the interactive workshops. Each interactive workshop will have a session leader and a secondary leader. The workshops will start with an interactive discussion about an hour before each of the breakout sessions. All attendees are welcome to join that main session. Attendees will then disperse into breakout sessions to enable small group discussion. Each breakout session will focus on a different subtopic. Check the agenda for each of those. Attendees are requested to pick one breakout session. But if you want to, if you're there for a few minutes and you think, okay, well, I wanted to go over to this other one, you feel free to switch as well, but try to stay in one session for the majority of the time to help the discussion. All attendees will reconvene for breakout session readouts and to form an action plan by the end of the day. All events associated with the workshop will be outlined in a thick green line on the agenda. In the main session, just a couple rules of play. You can raise your hand to speak. We ask that if you do speak, you introduce yourself, be respectful, and speak very briefly so that we can stay on time and keep the discussion moving. The goal of the main session, which we're going to kick off here first, is engagement among policy, industry, and academia to identify areas for future collaboration and propose ongoing discussions after the symposium. The main sessions will be live streamed for our virtual audience and recorded. We have provided you with blue sheets of paper you see on your table here. I'll lift one up. So anytime you notice a main discussion going off track or into the weeds, please raise this blue sheet. Feel free to do it, even if nobody else is doing it. This is not saying it's boring or inappropriate content, but that the session leaders need to refocus on that discussion. Again, we have a timeline to keep with, so we want to keep the discussion and conversation going. Discussion leaders can also use these blue sheets for straw polls to ask questions and get feedback from the audience. I wanted to do one real briefly. I was curious, how many folks came from overseas to come and attend IORS today? And how many came from somewhere in the US? Okay, so a little bit more from the US, but that's a great showing for the international attendees. So thank you so much for traveling. That's a great result. Nice diversity. So that's an example of the straw polls that we can use today if the discussion leaders feel like they want to do that. Sorry. Okay, following the main session, we'll break out into breakout sessions for the small group discussions. The breakout sessions are not going to be live streamed. They will not be recorded. So no audio or video recording is to take place. During each breakout session, we'll divide among several topics, as I mentioned on the agenda. Please pick one to attend, and you can change over if you realize that you might want to enjoy a different breakout session. Breakout sessions have assigned leaders who will guide the conversation. Each breakout has large sheets of paper, like you see on the left and right in this room. There are also buckets with paper and pen and sticky pads and magnets, so all the different tools to help enable the discussion, however the breakout session leader would like to do that. During breakout sessions, we will employ the Chatham House rule, meaning comments are not to be attributed to anyone. We ask that you respect the privacy and confidentiality of all participants. This will allow frank and honest discussions within each breakout session. The IORS webpage on its.nti.gov has a Google Doc where session leaders and main session leaders and breakout session leaders will write high-level conclusions, action items, main discussion points, and points of agreement. This document is publicly viewable by everyone, so you just go to our website and open it up. But we ask that only discussion leaders or their designees edit that document. Discussion leaders, this is your reminder to put your high-level conclusions into that Google Doc. The link, again, is on our IORS webpage. Finally, at the conclusion of each breakout session, we will reconvene as a main group and restart the live stream. The breakout session leaders will summarize the key topics and discussion outcomes. We will usually have a bit more time for discussion after this recap. So I think all that information is on the screen just for you to see. And then on the next slide, which I think I'm supposed to control here. All right. So I'm going to mention where the breakout sessions are headed. We will do this after this main session discussion. And I will also reshare this slide when we break from that main session. Session 1 is in salon, and 1 and 2 are in this salon room. We'll have 1 and 2 in the corners of the room. Breakout session 3 is out in the foyer. So there's tables. If you go out into the left, those 2 tables out there are for breakout session 3. 4 and 5 are in the Monarch room. That's on this level of the facility. If you go out and go down the hallway past the bar, it's going to be labeled as Monarch. So 2 sessions are going to be in Monarch, 4 and 5. Breakout session 6 will be downstairs in the lower level, room 149, and we will have someone, Anna Maria or Kathy, will escort the folks in breakout room 6 down to that room downstairs. For each of the breakouts, we have the titles here for the first breakout session this morning, but in the afternoon, the same breakout room numbers will be going to the same locations. Okay, I think I covered all my talking points. We will transition a little early over to our first interactive discussion, and this will be led by Paul Sledden from Digital Catapult Sonic Labs UK, assisted by Maggie Chow from ITRI Taiwan. So welcome to our first speakers.
Good morning, everyone. So first of all, very much thanks to Jeremy for the very good overview of the session today. Made my job a lot easier. So my name is Paul Slynn. I'm the project director for Sonic Labs in Digital Catapult, looking after all aspects of the project. And so I'd like to thank Julie Cubb and all of our team for the opportunity to lead this session today. It's a really great opportunity. And so over the last day or so, you've had a lot of information and presentations from the lightning sessions and presentations. So I'm sure you've got a lot of burning questions, some of which may have been answered yesterday and some of which have now stimulated further questions. And really, as Jeremy mentioned, we're just going to open the floor to you guys to present your questions. You'll provide some feedback, and then it's really open to everyone to contribute to the question and discussions, and we'll record questions, answers and key agreements before we then go on to the breakout sessions. So just like to offer over to Maggie for introductions as well. I'll take a seat.
Hello everyone, this is Maggie Zhao from ITRI Taiwan. So as Paul and Jeremy just mentioned, this breakout session is hello. Hi, this is Maggie Zhao from Taiwan. So as Jeremy and Paul just mentioned, for this breakout session, we would like to discuss more about what are the topics that the labs are already collaboration, what are the topics that we would like to work further together. So during this time, we would like to hear more from your thoughts, so we can hear more about the feedback and the questions or the comment, and maybe we can conclude with some action item, and then we will be the topic for the IORS next year. So thank you.
So with these things, it's always who wants to go first with a question that they'd like to raise to start the discussion. I believe we're going to have some mics to pass around as well, Jeremy, is that right? Okay. Who'd like to go first? Silence. The question is, who would like to go first?
All right. Check. Okay, there we go. So Lincoln Lavoie from the University of New Hampshire Interoperability Lab. I'll be brave and try to see if we can break the ice here. So we've talked a lot about, like, obviously the integration, interoperability, and like challenges faced by the operators and stuff like that. We haven't really talked a lot yet about kind of like the open source communities as much and what the role is that they play. So like, in my view, a lot of like the bleeding edge research that happens in the university systems to enable things like what is now 5G and what will be 6G and even front haul and stuff like that is enabled through those open source platforms. And so that be successful, we really need to see how we're going to have a kind of integration and a back and forth between what is those open source communities and what will be the commercial implementations of O-RAN and 5G and 6G to enable kind of like a sustainable ecosystem. And so how can we promote that? How can we actually make that achievable overall within the industry? I guess is probably the starting point.
That's a really good question, and I think the key thing to this is collaboration. It's we have a lot of obviously with open source software development. There are many opportunities to do that in all of the organisations involved in Open RAN, academia, vendors, MNOs, as you mentioned. And what I think we really need to do is to generate that ecosystem of collaboration to bring all these ideas together. That's my initial thoughts, and I'd like to open the floor.
So I'm Tracy Van Brappa with AT&T, and Lincoln asked my question. And I just wanted to point out for breakout session 5, what are labs willing to share? That should actually say open source and what are labs willing to share? Open source reference designs are of interest to industry, primarily to accelerate commercialization. But as Lincoln already explained, very, very important for research teams in public research centers and universities worldwide. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. And I think there's a great opportunity within that breakout session to discuss that further, what we think the options are to collaborate and bring this together. And just like to reiterate something that Julie mentioned yesterday is it's not just about having discussions, Q&A today, breakout sessions, and then we all go back to normal business. What we're really looking to do today is to generate connections and then follow up. And so these key topics, such as open source, we can then collate, identify people who want to work on that particular topic and then move it forward.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Margaret from North Carolina State University and ARPOM and OTIC. One thing, I know, I'm not sure if this will be of interest for this track, but anyway, I will say it's more of not the technical, but more of administrative. But it's really to collaboration because I've seen the labs are collaborating in many of the technical aspects, but from my perspective, things like the administrative thing, like for example, the charging models, the business model, like the structure of the lab, those are the things like the different labs are doing individual, of course, based on their environment, but there are things that can be common and shared from the administrative perspective and the business perspective of the labs.
So there was a few things in there. First of all, you said traffic, business models, and the third topic was, sorry? Infrastructure of labs.
No, I mean the business structure.
Okay.
No, like the infrastructure.
So let's take traffic first of all, and I think there is a similar view on the business side of it as well. It's very clear that test and evaluation of Open RAN products can depend on the traffic models that you actually use in your labs. That's something that I've found even from a previous life where I was involved in test and evaluation of 3G infrastructure with Deutsche Telekom, and we found that test and validation of RAN technology in their labs with their parameters, their traffic models, give different test results And in essence, I would explain it's like a Venn diagram. Some folks that they had in their labs we didn't see, and some folks in our lab they didn't see because we had different setups, and then obviously common things in the middle. But it's quite a challenging thing that, because traffic models are quite sensitive information. And I can say that from the UK perspective, we haven't been in discussion with the MNOs around testing with various traffic profiles. And of course, the vendors have some predefined ones. I think one of the issues there is confidentiality, and it's very, very commercially sensitive. I think that there is definitely a value in testing Open RAN products with realistic traffic profiles, but getting to that data and getting it from the MNOs is actually quite difficult. I think that's something that the industry as a whole needs to recognise and work better on, around taking traffic profiles, perhaps defining a variety of traffic profiles that are anonymised. They can then be used to validate Open RAN products in various scenarios. That's my thoughts. Maggie, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would like to add on the comment about the business model collaboration, because that is also one thing we would like to discuss within our lab discussion, because as though that most of the labs are sponsored by the government, but without these resources, what can we do, the sustainable business model? I think that is what we would like to discuss further. So maybe we can discuss this one at our breakout session.
Doug Montgomery, NIST. So one thing I think we ought to recognize, right, is there's testing has multiple goals, right, across a wide set of interests, be it, whether it's MNOs actually looking for sort of acceptance testing or of products. But one of the goals of testing is to actually test the testing program and testing system. And so in that realm, you could even consider having synthetic data sets, right? We talk about interlab comparisons and trying to make sure that labs' testing gear, testing configurations produce comparable results. I don't know that they have to be exact, but comparable results. That could be done with anonymized real traces, but it could also be done with carefully crafted synthetic traces, strictly meant not to characterize the real performance of the product for acceptance testing, but is effectively a calibration data set for the test labs. And keeping in mind that there are all these different end purposes to testing, from very early on sort of product innovation kind of testing, researchy testing, to interop market development testing, and then the kinds of product certification that would be more aligned to a procurement or an engineering action by MNOs.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think that it sort of builds upon the topic we just discussed, that if you take some traffic profiles, for example, or as you say, parameterization that comes from an MNO source community, it might not necessarily stress test the products sufficiently. So having those synthetic models to really test and calibrate the products across the range is a good idea, yeah.
Yeah, and one thing about synthetic data sets like that, hopefully they will be fully shareable.
Of course. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm N.K. Shankar, representing Rutgers University WinLab, and have one of the breakout sessions on how can different labs make progress by collaborating and sharing the burden. I'm just sharing some thoughts related to that. Everyone cannot attend every breakout session. So one thing from a test lab perspective, I see different test labs will have different equipment setups, and especially in a OTIC type context, they'll have equipment, proprietary equipment with all kinds of constraints on sharing information. And I think it's one of the breakouts. But as we collaborate, I think there's going to be a difference of one common set of tests. Maybe it's open source based, where there is more free sharing, and there'll be some more tests with advanced configurations, which are probably more difficult to share. And I think we need to discuss that and figure out how that'll work. Just to give you a little bit more perspective, I am focused on one project on energy testing for ORAN. And so when I talked to different labs, I said, can we repeat this test in your lab? So we can do a simple RU, but an advanced RU, they'll say, oh, we don't know. Yes, we have that, but we don't know if we can share that information. So I don't know how all the tests will be fully shared and collaborated if we have that kind of constraint. I think it's going to be there going forward. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that boils down to the level of the testing and the type of testing. There'll be general IoT end-to-end testing that is perfectly shareable, and I think collaboration on those types of tests to make them consistent, repeatable across all labs is a great idea. Not to put Maggie on the spot here, but I know that with a lot of the work that you're doing with TIP towards badging and certification, and in fact, we're now, with our MOU, now starting to work more closely in that area. Perhaps you've got something to share around development of common test cases, etc.
Yeah, so as just mentioned that we are the TIP community lab, so we have some rules about within this community, all the information that we'll be able to share with others. But the thing is that the share is to generate more benefit or generate more information from it. So based on that kind of ideas, we think we can set up some rules. For example, that we also work with the local operators. They are not the TIP member yet, but with their agreement, we are also allowed to share kind of information, because the meaning is still for like the operator would like to share the information in order to get more comment or feedback from the other partners, so that they can know what further they can do. I think for some kind of concerns or some kind of agreement, that we'll be able to figure out how we can share this kind of information for useful information.
Thank you.
Hi, Ajay Rajkumar from AT&T. So my question is a little more basic. I know this particular topic talks about test collaboration, which would generally imply that, yes, there are multiple labs that are replicating the tests, and that could be collaborated upon. What my question to the community would be, are the test specifications sufficient, the current test specifications that are available through TIFG or others, are they sufficient, or do they need to evolve further to have more tests? Or are we really in the domain of minimalistic testing that just proves that, yes, two entities, two network functions can talk, and moreover, performance testing, as some have alluded to earlier, should also be looked at very carefully, not just the interface testing or the functional testing of the interface.
Yeah, so my thoughts on that is, based on what I'm hearing, and even from our own experiences, that that of course we're on a lines to find test cases, features, parameters that we need to evaluate, but there's definitely need to involve those for sure. It's absolutely clear from the discussions even we had yesterday that the test cases is a key focus area, and development, evaluation of those, and bringing a common understanding of what should be tested across labs, making it repeatable, definitely needs more work. And certainly from our perspective in London, I can comment that the MNOs are very, very keen on performance metrics, and testing equipment in real-life environments similar to the outdoor network that we have in London is of much interest to the MNOs. So they're keen to evaluate the performance of Open RAN products, and with reference to traditional RAN. So more work to do.
So Lincoln Lavoie, UNH Interoperability Lab. So building on that same comment and some of Doug's comments, like I wholeheartely agree that like having definitions that can be shared of the traffic profiles, RF environments that are used for testing, especially as we drift into performance testing cases, will be the only way that we can build anything that's repeatable. And those need to be shared and published documentations and test plans and labs and collaborated across the industry if the operator MNO community is going to adopt any type of badging or testing results across the board, whether it's from TIP, whether it's from ORAN Alliance, it doesn't matter. If they can't say this is what that testing means, this is where it came from, and this is what we understand what a pass, a fail, or a measurement means in the context of that testing, they won't trust it, they won't adopt it, they won't use it as a consumer of that badge. And then the whole house of cards falls down for building up a testing ecosystem across the industry, because it will collapse back into MNOs will run their own testing specific to them and their use cases only, right? So if we really want this to be a collaborative effort across the industry and across regions, communities, and stuff like that, the only way we can do that is to have properly, fully fleshed out test plans from that and understanding that those results can be published and stuff like that. And I think that's something we have to push for in the TIP communities, in the ORN Alliance communities. That data has to be shareable, or else it doesn't become trustworthy to the end consumer, the MNOs.
Absolutely, great point. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's something that we need to address in the breakout sessions today. We won't solve it today, but I think that we at least collate, collaborate, and at least describe how we best move forward with the topic from going forward from phase would be a great thing to achieve today.
I think that is the ultimate goal that we were talking about, the lab collaboration, especially when we do the testing. We always want to, we can have to share some loading from the operator in order to let them adopt this kind of new solution. But it's a long way to go. But I think through this kind of discussion, we can make a little bit more aggressive.
Hi everyone, this is Michele from Northeastern in Boston. I'll be moderating breakout number 4 on actually collaborating to bring up an OTIC and to do training. So collaboration is something I've been thinking a lot about. And I see it on 2 different planes. One is the technical plane. And in that case, I totally agree with Lincoln and what has just been discussed. So it's important to have a set of ground rules that apply in common, but I'm not sure if I would call that collaboration. I see that more as the role of the test specifications, not necessarily the role of the collaboration across OTICs. So it's an exercise that comes even before the OTICs. And then this brings me to the question that I want to bounce to the audience, which is assuming we reach a point where there is a good set of specifications that are clear in terms of the steps that need to be taken when doing a test, and also clear in terms of what the results means, as Lincoln was mentioning. What is a level of collaboration across OTICs that still will sustain a sustainable ecosystem from a business point of view? Because at the end of the day, OTICs, some of them are funded by the government, some of them operate in a market. So what is the level of collaboration that still enables a competitive market and OTICs to be sustainable?
I think that's a great topic to bring into the breakout session. Because as you say, I think what you're alluding to is if we achieve the ultimate goal that you've got consistent repeatable tests across labs, then how many labs do you need? I think there are always going to be some variations, local markets and things that are around connecting up ORAN equipment to other products, etc. But again, I'm not sure of how that's all going to work out. I think that's a great topic for discussion in your breakout session.
Hi, good morning. My name is Ashutosh Datta from Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab up in Maryland. I'm also the co-chair for IEEE 5G 6G Innovation Testbed, which recently we have been collaborating with Tracy, with AT&T and other folks as well. I just wanted to throw that out. Right now, IEEE has a open neutral 5G 6G innovation testbed, and that can be used to help as part of collaboration from various companies, industry academics, startups, to help act like a hub and spoke model. We can discuss that more during breakout session 5 maybe. I have another question for clarification. When we set topics for test collaboration, is it just interoperability or is it like proof of concept? Because I work with, as part of my day job, work with many of the government agencies like Department of Homeland Security and so on and so forth. And they like to see how they can take advantage of Open RAN, right? So is that something also under the scope, within the scope, I should say, part of this testbed collaboration? Just wanted to clarify that because that's going to be very important as well. We create a specific use case, do a proof of concept in one of these OTICs or maybe multiple OTICs around the world. Thank you.
Sure. Do you have any thoughts on that? No? So, yeah, look, at the end of the day, there'll be different scenarios that will evolve through different applications of Open RAN technology, and the more there are of them, then the greater the collaboration and standardization on those test cases involved. So I think it's, again, that this will pan out, but I think is hold that for the breakout session. You can discuss the way forward on it.
Good morning, Gustavo Correa from CQD Excellence Center in Open Networks in Brazil. When we talk about establishing new OTICs, because we are trying to be one, there's still, we miss some kind of shared knowledge of what is already done and what bundles were already validated. So to the establishment of new OTICs, have some kind of a repository with some guidelines for those who are starting to create a local ecosystem that we are trying to do?
Not sure of that myself. I think, again, perhaps deferring to the TIP point of view on that, I think there is probably something to add to that from Maggie.
Yeah, we have been asking the same question quite a little bit time, but we are from TIP Community Lab, so I'm not familiar with the Orion Alliance, but I do remember, I do know that several colleagues here, especially we have a representative for Taiwan, the Taiwan OTIC Lab, so I can introduce you to them for the.
Yeah, we also are part of TIP Community Labs. We used to have this sharing of information, but about the OTICs themselves. Some OTICs are not part of TIP, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Doug again. So I think it's important that we be realistic about what kinds of testing can be done in commodity test labs, independent test labs, and what kinds of testing will always have to be done as, some form of vendor-specific system integration testing. Because I think we could try to chase a holy grail here of accuracy when I don't think it's achievable in commodity labs. When you also consider, we have to get around to the discussion of how these labs are, as Lincoln brought up, economically viable after, assuming that at some point the government funding runs out. And so I think that's something we ought to think about, is what forms of testing, even for things like performance testing, sort of what the goals should be for commodity test labs and which part will always be part of a vendor-specific situation of testing.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that will come out in the discussion around prioritization of test cases and applications and scenarios. So I think most hopefully we leave today with a lot of people connecting on how we move these topics forward. And I think with that, then we'll of course be focusing on the very high priority areas about consistent tests, which are really absolutely necessary to demonstrate conformance to the MNOs, etc. And then afterwards, there'll be perhaps some niche discussions around test cases that are relevant in some market or other. And of course, then there'll be some other scenarios, as you just mentioned, that really will be dependent on the application of the Open RAN products that are under consideration.
Dr. Luis da Silva from the Virginia Tech, Washington DC OTIC. The test collaboration topic is very interesting, and what I would like to hear today from different folks' perspectives is that test collaboration, for me, the idea is involve basically the cross OTICs, collaboration and testing. Then it will be interesting to hear today what are the scenarios that we can have, to put together in terms of test and use case that allow to do cross OTIC collaboration. Can be between Japan OTIC with Washington DC or Iowa State University OTIC. What are these scenarios that we envision together that we can have an end-to-end test that can be realized across of OTIC? The second thing is the following. Test collaboration as well may involve, right, interconnect these test beds together. My laboratory today is part of the Accord project. And one thing that we are address inside of the Accord project is what we call the federations of OTICs, right, to realize the test. I would like to hear today as well in these sections how you guys envision the federations of OTIC in such a way that they can be interconnected, in such a way that we can use the expertise or the resources that exist in specific OTICs that is missing another OTIC, in such a way that we can come together and do a test that will be valuable for the overall community.
Yep, great point. So yeah, I encourage that to be a topic that's in the breakout sessions today. And if you're interested in this particular topic, then please join. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Arup Bhuya, and I'm from Idaho Laboratory, Idaho National Laboratory. And first of all, I have to thank my friends in NTI, ITS, Julie and Margaret and Jeremy for adding the session on security. And I think, you know, when the point on what testing should be done, I mean, we certainly think that security has to be right from the beginning, but as my friend Mikali has pointed out, I almost see that a basis, a core set of testing, and I'm based on security. And mind you, I mean, there's a lot of actually good security specs are being written for OpenRAN also, SG11, I believe. But I think when I think about security, whether it will withstand any attacks in the field, right? That's where it becomes most important. Things that are really can happen in the field. There are thousands of vulnerabilities. If you look at the databases, you know, your head will swim, right? I mean, so I'm really not talking about all the vulnerability, but things that can happen when the calls are in progress in the field, right? Those are really some things I firmly believe, based on our work on 5G for DoD or USD, there is a basic set that can be almost the startup collaboration that everyone can execute that, hey, you know, we put that in the field and there is some adversaries, there's some basic attacks that it can withstand. So we are, along with Professor Saeed Hussain in Penn State, I'll be leading the discussions in session number 6, and I know everybody cannot be there, but you can provide us input at any time. We'll make sure your inputs are taken into account. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, David DeBreck from Cable Labs. As I mentioned yesterday in my lightning talk, we've been doing this kind of work for a different side of the industry for going on 35 years now. And I can tell you from that experience, as a test and integration center, you're not going to make a lot of money. The only way that it works is it's a membership type activity where all the operators involved are providing money to this entity to go off and do that integration testing, to do the interoperability testing, do the compliance testing, et cetera. So it's already been discussed a number of times or touched on, but I think there needs to be a lot more discussion on what the business model looks like and how it's going to be sustainable, because the government money is going to run out.
Yeah.
And once that happens, if the OTICs aren't sustainable, then we don't have a model that goes forward. It's all going to collapse. So I think there hasn't been enough discussion about that. We need to do more.
Yeah, for sure. I think in the early days, everyone is just collaborating around OTIC testing processes and test cases. But by the time we get something that is standardized and repeatable, then there won't be those questions. And for sure, once government funding runs out, that is a business model topic that needs to be addressed. So yeah, great topic for later.
Vijay from NC State. So I would like to give a different perspective to this and see where we are at. The way I say it, I mean, we all want multi-vendor open ecosystem, especially that I come from academia. We do want open source as much as we can. But if you see the reality of it, right, we don't really have true 5G. We don't have new use cases that will bring new business to the operators. And when it comes to Open RAN, a lot of big vendors or big operators are going with one specific equipment vendor, like $14 billion, right, thing. So and I see why, right? There is just so much issue with multi-vendor, right? If something goes wrong, who takes the responsibility of it, right? So let's say if DU and CU, we do all the testing, and obviously you can't do all the testing, right? It can't be that comprehensive ever, unless you spend years and years on it. So if something goes wrong, then obviously DU vendor will say, you know, I'm not responsible, and RU vendor will say, no, I'm not responsible. So the system integrator, which was also brought up yesterday, is a big issue. So with all that, you know, issues, you know, how do we see a way forward? You know, obviously, small companies would be very interested in this, right? And the test equipment guys would be very interested in OTIC because they get new businesses out of it. But this is not going to survive until and unless there is a real business case for the operators around the world. If we have more OTICs than the equipment vendors, that's not going to, you know, survive for very long. So with that, I mean, how do we let's say, kind of promote this multi-vendor, bring that confidence in various people in the ecosystem that this is the way to go. There is a real benefit in terms of use cases, cost, whatever that is. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure, of course, and that's it's quite a big subject. I think the future of Open Run is certainly in there, and I'm sure we can touch upon that in the sessions later. I think from our experience in the UK, what we find is that we really need to nominate an organisation that takes the SI role. We were doing the SI role in the very early days, and in some aspects we bring on a CU-DU vendor, which is usually they're making both products, and they logically become best placed to become that SI. And realistically, you do need to take an SI role overall for the Open Run implementation. I don't see that the MNOs are going to be very happy dealing with individual product suppliers in a commercial model. So I think the role of the SI is very, very important, and it needs something that needs to be discussed further. And I'm just wondering, Maggie, you got some thoughts on that?
Yeah, we face the same situation when we are doing the testing because we are working with the RU vendor. So sometimes they have the same complaint. So it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's the other partners. But I think this is the other reason why we like to have this kind of integration testing. So that one thing is we can establish the capability for the system integrator. So we need to have this role. But the other thing is that we also need to encourage the vendors, either from the RU or from the DU vendors, that you have to have this capability to figure out what kind of problem it is, not just say it's not my problem. So once you want to finish or once you want to pass this kind of testing program, you have to figure out, even though it's not your problem, you need to define what kind of problem that your partner need to figure it out. I think this is the process, it's the learning process, not just from testing lab or from others. Also, we need to educate the vendors when they try to doing this kind of testing.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anand from Parallel Wireless. So yesterday we all heard about from the MNOs about the challenges the Open RAN companies are facing. One of the major challenge everybody spoke about was the KPIs, the performance measurements. And we as an Open RAN company learn or get the real life experience only when we go and put our systems for a POC or a field trial at MNO, and which is too late. And we learn in the field, do the patches, testing, and then get the KPIs to a certain level. So the question is, what more the labs can do to get the real life experience where the vendors can do the testing, outdoor field testing, because KPIs are great in the lab, but when you show up in the field based on the terrain, etc., with the RF conditions, your software is not tuned. So what labs can do? What additional field testing scenarios can be added as part of the lab testing? Other challenge is the frequency or the outdoor frequency. Even if some labs are providing outdoor test environment, but they don't have all the frequencies for the ORAN vendor to transmit. So can lab collaborate with the government and get the test frequencies, wherein a US company can test within the US frequencies of UK or Asia. And then I can get that real world experience and then go and deploy my ORAN solution. So that's the question.
Okay, I think there's two questions there. So the first question round about KPIs, that is something that for sure we've got some experience from in the UK. We do have an outdoor network, so that's a small network in central London composed of 2 rooftop macrocells, 7 microcells, and that does really give us the real opportunity to test and evaluate Open RAN products in real MNO type scenarios. And so we've, in what we call our MNO industry group, we are having discussions with them on how best to utilise those assets with them. Of course, that's quite a sensitive discussion, so we're having one-on-one discussions with them separately. I've had one of them to date, which was quite detailed. And in fact, that MNO suggested that they would share with us their KPI definitions, and then potentially, which they thought they would need to go back and have some discussions around how sensitive and perhaps which subset of KPIs perhaps they would actually share the definitions of and the values of those KPIs that they evaluate against. So they're very, very keen to ensure that the external labs do as much as possible to evaluate Open RAN products so that their job is easier. And they're always asking us, which products have you tested and which ones work? And of course, we've got some quite sensitive contractual relationships with those vendors, and so that information isn't readily available to them. But it's certainly an area that MNO engagement, I think, is key to the success of Open RAN in terms of test and evaluation, just purely from end-to-end testing to adding performance testing to real performance metrics that they use. And in fact, MNOs actually quite often have different parameter definitions, and of course different targets that they have, which are linked to commercial outcomes. So I think the area of KPIs is very, very important. It is a step of evolution of Open RAN testing to evaluate performance to KPIs that are well defined and to ideally to values that we can benchmark against. And that for me really, really needs more engagement with the MNO communities, not just, of course, from our perspective in the UK, but in the US and around the world. And I think regarding the spectrum question, if we'll touch on that before I'll hand over to Maggie, for sure you can test, I think, you'll tell me if I'm wrong, in your lab on cable to various frequency combinations, but I think that really boils down to perhaps what the FCC will allow in the US, whether they'll permit temporary licenses or test licenses that are limited in geographical deployment, limited in output, and of course then limited in time availability. That's what we've found in the UK is Ofcom, our regulatory body, is allowing to do so, but it's very, very restricted. Maggie?
Yeah, I think this is a very good question about how the labs can collaboration, because as the colleagues from Cable Lab just mentioned that testing is costs a lot. So not a single lab will be able to have the resources to cover all the facilities. So that's definitely why we need to collaborate. But before we do this kind of collaboration, maybe we can think more about what is the differential we have so that we can secure our resources. We do that so that we can make this, we can leverage the resource from different labs to do things together. Maybe the spectrum, this is a good topic, but we can figure out if we really want to work with this kind of topic, what else do we need to work with, or we need to talk with that. So I think this is a very good topic. Maybe we can discuss at the breakout session either. Thank you.
Hi, this is Ku from Keysight. I co-chair the ORAN TFG group as well, working with quite a few of you here. But speaking on behalf of Keysight, I think a suggestion for the team may be to consider mapping out the areas of testing, because we discuss about testing a lot and there are lots of discussions about performance testing. So within Keysight, we do actually keep track of a list of basically test areas. That includes, obviously the conformance, interoperability end-to-end, but there's functional performance, stability, robustness, rainy day scenarios. And I think one thing that's been missed out is in terms of 3GPP feature testing. ORAN is designed for 3GPP networks. And basically our customers are asking us like, okay, we can test all the ORAN Alliance test specifications, which are basically focusing on the ORAN specs. right? Compliance to the interfaces defined by ORAN Alliance, but still you got to perform all the 3GPP features. The operators are buying ORAN not just for the sake of ORAN, right? They need to make sure that it still works for the features that they want. For example, things like NTN and all those things, right? This test specs does not come from ORAN Alliance because ORAN Alliance is not into NTN. But then if you want to be able to deploy or experiment ORAN for NTN, what do? Where are the test cases? So my suggestion is maybe for the team to come up with the whole set holistic view of all the test areas, including 3GPP feature testing, because feature testing would include functional performance as well. And then there are things like, for example, operations and maintenance, supportability, where are those test cases? Then we can start to look at, once we finalize the list, maybe it's a good point where the labs can start to look at identifying their areas of expertise. It's like Airbus and Boeing, when they built their aircraft, they would actually have their engines designed somewhere, right? The wings and all those things, right? Perhaps then you will build onto that on Doug's point, that you may have some labs who are basically focusing on early stages innovation, right? Going beyond release 18 or 19 to look at some early explorations using ORAN. And there are some labs who are basically focusing on certification badging, and some labs are focusing on deployment readiness test cases. So using that test area, maybe we can try to build a multi-dimensional matrix to identify where each of the lab may want to focus on. They can connect some dots and stuff like that to figure out, you can overlay a lens of like, these are the labs who are basically focusing on innovation and which areas for innovation. These are the labs who are basically focusing on commercialization and which areas of commercialization.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I think focusing on performance is great, but it's not the only thing. I think the 3GPP feature testing is missing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's point number one. And then point number two is in terms of the data. I think the traffic profiles and all this data, the channel modeling, the impairment models, all these things are important. And obviously those are needed, but I think we should try to think about the training, testing, and evaluation data sets as well for AI/ML models. Very often we hear that the data sets for AI/ML model training, they're limited in terms of the complexities of the scenarios, and they're short in duration. So I think when we look at, the front hall validation, which is obviously important, we may need to look at, for example, the data sets, right, for AI/ML models, lifecycle management. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was some really good points on there about the full suite of test cases and evaluation scenarios. And I think probably where that would lead to Ku is we really need to be organised about which labs contribute to which areas of test and evaluation, because I think for everyone to just contribute to every single test scenario is potentially going to be unmanageable. But I think those groups that you've described are very, very logical, and I think that's an area for discussion around how we focus on those different areas.
Yeah, and then you can look at the gaps as well in terms of like where should we focus on in terms of like increasing test coverage, where the gaps and stuff like that. Maybe those are the areas whereby the fundings, for example, could be directed towards. And again, just overlay with a few lens, try and say these are the innovation areas, these are the commercialization areas, these are deployment areas.
Absolutely.
And certification, badging, I think all those will fit into the equation once you have this metrics work out. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, Andres Lalisch, I14Y Labs. So one observation and a kind of question. So to me, it looks that the level of majority for test plans and specifications, etc., is quite different when we look at frontal, mid-hole, etc., so let's call it horizontal exchangeability, and look at the vertical exchangeability dealing with rig, apps, SMO, etc. There's still a lot of work to do. So from that perspective, I think it's a quite general question to think about test collaboration, and presumably it could be a good approach to separate between this more horizontal view and the vertical view on rig and the apps. And second question is, so does test collaboration and the collaboration between the labs include a contribution to improvement of test plans? So because that is something, at least my impression, it's missing. So it would be great if the community, financed also by the government, can contribute to the improvement of the test specifications. And that we just accelerate the development with this joint power.
Thank you.
The last question. So you talk a lot about MNOs, mobile operators. So, okay, happy to hear that. So I'm wearing now my DT hat. But how about all these applications in industry,
for sure,
campus networks, enterprise networks? It seems to be an important market and also very interesting for the development and the evolution of Open RAN components.
Okay. Yeah, some great points there. So I think the first one is really around the horizontal view of testing. So I think that kind of builds upon what Ku just mentioned around how we organise ourselves around developing test cases and so we can divide and conquer properly. And the second point thing around is around contribution. I think for sure we need to develop a core set of organisations that really can contribute and drive it forward. So it's not just really about collaboration and learnings that are obviously part of it, but really pushing for lead organisations to promote and develop and contribute to those standards is really important. And of course, yeah, for sure, MNOs is, I guess, from our UK perspective, the government is driving us towards that direction. But for sure, there's a lot of applications out there, including private networks, etc., and industry. Yeah.
Just circling back to the discussion on the frequencies and outside testing, you absolutely in the US can do experimental licenses and stuff, but you generally have to kind of have a specific purpose and use case and know your antenna designs and transmit powers and stuff to do the application. So it's a little chicken egg of define what you want from a test plan, then be able to make the application to secure that license to be able to actually execute that testing in an open air environment.
Yeah. I did expect that, and it's similar to the UK. You essentially submit what your application is. They'll evaluate it, see where there's potential interference sources to and from, and then that then affects your, as again, geographic location, power, that sort of thing. So yeah, I did expect that. I just wasn't aware specifically. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Xiuming Li, and it's great to see a lot of people from academia, industry, and also from operators. So in today's question period, I only heard one. Oh, sorry. In today's conversation, I only heard one operator, my friend RJ was talking about here. Most of them are from the academia and development communities. So maybe my statement or question here is more of how can we make it ultimate goal that is applicable to the MNOs operators, because we ultimately need to provide solid service, B59, whatever the 9 is, to our customers. So if we recall in the telecom industry long enough, in good old days, we have Bell Labs, which publish Bell Core, volumes and volumes of documentations that we all follows, right? The lab, when it comes to the lab, it becomes very innovative, a play plan or whatever you call it, but certain discipline may need to be put in place. I was thinking of what if all the OTICs can publish their capabilities. Say, number one is we have standard of 3GPP, which ultimately we're going to implement in the field. So any vendors or developers, when your product come up, any of the OTIC lab can say, I'm doing this conformance testing, complying with 3GPP standard, release what? With that, when vendor approaches to MNOs, or they say, talking to me, hey, I have this product or those that, I say, okay, have you certified on those? If you're not certified, you don't spend time, right? So that's one thing, is the capability of the OTIC, conformance. You meet the standard or not. Then second is, the advanced features that you have that's unique. You want to test, it's okay. It's not, you can talk to me, I will have my own lab test anyway, right? And performance testing, that's another set of things. One thing we have not talked about in this testing is the software quality. Are you conform with best practice of the software development? That included security embedded in this development. We have not talked about that because that's also another level of, stability and the quality. of the potential product, let's say, we're going to do, right? So on that, and also in order to operators go to deploy on those, so the capability of our tech may have a category of deployable level. It's 80% deployable, 60% deployable, whatever that would be. That's geared towards the ease of deployment, right? Speed of deployment, automations, all those things. I know it's a big topic. And then the last one is for operators to do is to say, what about the cost, right? So conventional BBUs is one pizza box, ASIC based. Now we go to generic compute. Is that, let's say, for simple ones, I'm not talking about a CU, it's a DU. A server, is that comparable with a BBU box? Right? How can we do that as an industry from business model standpoint? We also need to look at that aspect. For now.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for those points. And I very much encourage taking those conversations into breakout areas and develop them from there and see where we go. Thank you.
Hey, hi, this is Ku from Keysight again. So just putting on my ORAN TFG co-chair hat, so just a short response on the point one. So ORAN Alliance right now, we're basically in the process of updating the OTIC's catalog that will better reflect the OTIC's capabilities and the service they provide. So I think that should be done quite soon. So maybe that would address some of the questions around what would the OTICs be able to offer in terms of like ORIU conformance or certification for the front haul versus other services. But that should be updated quite soon. Obviously, the team is seeking for continuous improvements. But we should discuss more of that in the breakout sessions. And maybe one of the actions would be for our ORAN Alliance in terms of how you'll be able to actively raise awareness to publish this information, so more proactively to try to address questions like this. This is a short comment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Gil.
Short. Julie Ka from NTIA ITS and program leader for IORS and 5G Challenge and RIC Forum. So it did strike a chord with me a couple people ago where we talk about software quality. And I know we've talked a lot about this, especially at ORAN Alliance, and then with the 5G challenge also. It was very challenging for our host lab to actually get the configurations the same as they were doing interoperability. So there was a lot of software challenges with software quality, basic software 101 with the modules, the CU and DU and RU itself, just these hard-coded parameters that weren't like basic software 101 principles. And also we've seen, so that's kind of on the input side as you're trying to run these tests, but then also on the output side, we've talked a lot about at ORAN Alliance about how can we compare the outputs more easily. And, can we have some sort of standard between the major test vendors, some sort of standardization so you can easily run things with any vendor or even open source software test solutions. So there's the whole modules themselves for test quality, as well as the test tools themselves. And that goes for both open source and proprietary, both test tools and modules themselves.
Great, thank you. And we'll definitely take that big topic on board in the discussions later.
Doug, again, one thing that I think is interesting here, right, is we're having these discussions about OTIC sharing and getting to common repeatable tests where the test and the test result is exactly the same across, last time I looked, there were almost 20 OTICs. And then we're talking about the sustainability of the economic model. At some point, once the seed funding comes to an end, these labs will be in competition with each other. And so the idea that you can go anywhere and have the same exact test with the same exact capabilities doesn't mesh well with the fact that this will become a competitive testing market. So I think we need to think about that. And in activities like in the TFLIG, trying to get more transparency about what OTIC services are offered, I think we ought to think more about having some ways of measuring and calibrating that, right? Because as far as I understand that activity right now, it's all self-declared. So I could say that I'm prepared to test your CU and your DU in a virtualized environment and have one Dell server to represent my cloud. Well, that's a lot different than the scale and the complexity of a real deployment. And so having some ways of calibrating or measuring, quantifying the capabilities of labs will be important, I think, in addition to whatever they self-declare.
Absolutely. And I think that's a topic that will evolve as we develop these standardized approaches to test cases and understand how the OTICs will, I guess it links to the commercial discussion we were having earlier, one of the points raised about what's the future of those OTIC labs, yeah.
And it's Tracy again with AT&T. I totally agree. But I would like to point out that quite a few of these ORAN open testing integration centers are built on existing mature public research centers. Here in the United States, of course, we have OTICs that are built upon, co-located with National Science Foundation Platform Advanced Wireless Research indoor-outdoor city-scale test beds. We have, test beds in Virginia who are supported by the state of Virginia, OTICs, Texas, and I'm just speaking about North America because that's my backyard. So I do agree that OTICs are going to be in competition, but a lot of these OTICs have been, test beds for decades, not all of them, and there's a lot of cooperation and collaboration, and some of them have gone extinct, and that's part of evolution, but part of our job is to promote the cooperation and the collaboration and make sure that if there is a center of excellence or a focus area that is nurtured and we have a compendium of experts, not just in North America, but worldwide. Because it's not just test plans and test beds, it's human expertise, which is very short supply, a scarce commodity. So we'll try to understand that and ask advice from, our partners who are here, this week.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ladan Pickering with Fujitsu. One of the things that I'm really interested in is building networks, thank you, building networks that applications can use. A lot of discussion has been on the front hall, and I know that a lot of labs are there. But the next step would be what really is going to bring value to ORAN, which are going to be the apps. And if we want to have a community of app developers, as everybody hopes, but I'm not sure if it's going to be a reality if there is not an infrastructure to build networks. I don't know if that will come to fruition, but my question is, are the labs going to build software to simulate the large networks? Because a lot of the apps will need larger networks to really kind of bring value or show the value. And what I've seen actually at Fujitsu in my lab, we have tried to use some of the open source that has been developed. But the problem with the open source is if it is not maintained, it's not useful. What we have today has not been maintained and is not usable. So what I like to understand is, are you trying to build any sort of software as part of your lab to allow applications to use these labs beyond a handful of radios, DU, CU, and the core?
Yeah, that's a great topic, and I think that really does require a lot of exploration. In general, app development is a really, really important part of Open RAN development and implementation. So I think that's a topic that really does need a lot of discussion around the labs, not just around, many of the questions have been around test and validation, but some of these apps are are going to be really, really important around developing the richness of Open RAN. So I think that's a great topic for discussion later too. Thank you.
Morning, my name's Jim Kroll. I'm CTO at Limitless Mobile. We're a small MNO in Pennsylvania. One of the questions that sort of developed in my mind whilst I've been listening to everyone is what engagement's actually been done with GSMA by the ORAN group. I've heard a lot of complaints about MNOs not engaging properly, how people are working together with MNOs and how that's done. As an MNO, we do interoperability testing with hundreds of MNOs around the world for roaming agreements. We do this day in, day out. There are set agreements, set test plans for how we do that work, how we make sure that we can work technically together, how we can make sure we can build together. Is that not something that the ORAN group should be reaching out to the GSMA for? If not for a framework of how that should work, if not copying what they're doing essentially as far as how industry interacts with each other on an ongoing basis today.
Do you have any thoughts on that one?
I think you bring out a very good suggestion when you mention about the operator, how they work together with the GSMA. Maybe we can bring this topic to the leadership from the ORAN Alliance, also tip and see how they can work together to form out this kind of similar models. Thank you.
And I think that's something that as an MNO group, the GSMA members do very well. You know, we've got roaming here today. I've brought my phone from Vodafone UK. That works here today. We've had no problems with it. Now, I'm not saying we can like for like do that, but I think that there's a framework there and a model that could be replicated.
Great, thank you.
Hey, hi, this is Ku again, speaking on behalf of ORAN Test Integration Focus Group. So within ORAN Alliance, we do actually have an ongoing collaboration with GSMA, specifically the NISA's program, looking at the ORAN security products assurance certification and badging, and looking at how ORAN, again, products from a security standpoint, when it comes to certification, badging, and assurance can be handled between GSMA, NISA's accredited labs, and as well as the OTICs. So we do, I think, in some way collaborate with GSMA, but I don't think it's the same level as per what you've actually mentioned just now. I think it's worth looking into further details, but we do have ongoing discussions, dialogues, and work with GSMA, but not the entire GSMA, just one group, obviously a very important group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Coop. Are we done for time? One more question?
Good morning. My name is James Langat. I come from Kenya, the largest MNO called Safaricom. My brief question was on the physical, what do I call it? The physical hardness of the equipment. Is there any test lab that is focusing on the physical for the equipment in terms of how they behave over time with the various scenarios in terms of temperature, power, and environmental conditions? Thank you.
This is a very good question. I think I'm not aware of which labs do look at sort of physical, environmental, and parametric type performance, but for sure, I think we should bring that into the discussion this afternoon. Maggie, have you got any view on that? Thank you.
Let's thank our discussion leaders.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, discussion leaders Paul and Maggie. We will now break out. Virtual audience will reconvene at 11:30. For everybody here, discussion breakout 1 is in this corner of the room, stage left. Number 2 is stage right in the back of the room. I believe okay. Breakout 3, go out to the foyer to the left. There's this tables. That'll be breakout session 3. 4 and 5, exit the room, go down the hallway past the bar. You'll see Monarch. There'll be 2 breakouts in Monarch, 4 and 5. And session 6 will be led downstairs by Kathy or Anna Maria, whoever appears first. Okay, I don't see him right now. So just congregate in the back of the room for breakout 6, and we'll head downstairs just momentarily. Okay, and as a reminder, if you're a breakout session leader, please conclude your discussions by 11:15. You will release your breakout group for break, and we will reconvene in this room at 11:30. Thank you. All right, welcome back. We will now begin the 11:30 session, reconvening and reporting out from the breakout sessions and forming an action plan. So this session will be led again by Paul Sludden and assisted by Maggie Chow. So I will welcome them back to the stage. And just a note for all the breakout session leaders, what we will do is invite two at a time to come up and participate in the discussion. So at the beginning of the session, let me invite breakout session 1 and 2 leaders. Please come to the podium here, and we're going to fill seats 3 and 4 here, and Paul and Maggie in seats 1 and 2. And let's get started.
That's right. So Maggie's here.
John, what's it goes over within the same presentation?
Yeah, so who's this? BJ?
Third one is NK, or VJ, isn't it? So let's see.
So why don't you from the podium ask for
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. So, as Jeremy mentioned, this is the part of the discussion where we summarize the breakout sessions. So Maggie is discussing her own material somewhat with me, which is fine, because Maggie led one of the breakout session 1. What we're really looking now for is from breakout session 2 for VJ to step up if he's available. No. VJ. Yeah. If you could join us at on the stage, please, and we'll go from there. I think it's Maggie will go first as she's on session 1. So just to summarize for everyone, what we intend to present here is some of the key agreements that come out of those breakout sessions and the key questions that we want to answer and the progress on these. And then more importantly, as I'll summarize at the end of the overall session, is what do we see as the breakout sessions have identified us to do next? So agreements, key questions with actions and next steps, and where do we go from here, VJ? Over to you. Oh, sorry, Maggie, first of all.
So, thank you. I also invite my colleagues from this breakout session to join with me. So I will share about our summary, a high-level summary of our breakout session, and also invite you to comment some more from your perspective. So we have two summary because our breakout session is to talk about what the labs are collaboration, what are the goal for this collaboration. So we said the first one is that the collaboration in lab should help the document and help the define the procedure to reduce the variety of the test results. So this is the first one. And the second one is that we need to identify the strong points, or we should say the focus area of each labs that we would like to collab with. So these are the two very high level summary from our breakout session.
So the discussions that we had is that the collaboration is still a question to be answered, because what is in the table for those labs that want to cooperate and collaborate with their procedures, with their results, when they can share the results, right? So trying to identify what are the segmentation of the market that each one of the labs is going to participate or to highlight will help for us to establish the ecosystem and bring the ones that have strong points to help the other labs with their knowledge, with their experiences, and to enhance the entire ecosystem. That's one of the ideas. And the other one related to reduce the variability. We still don't have, let's say, a calibration procedure for all of the labs to establish and really compare their results to say, okay, I'm doing the tests and the results will be very close to what other labs are doing. So the idea to have some kind of baseline testing for us to calibrate these different labs and establish that there is a baseline result should be something that everyone should be collaborating for us to have that kind of trust in the results of each lab, okay? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to summarize what we discussed in the breakout session 2. This was about what type of test should we conduct in multiple labs worldwide to evaluate consistency and repeatability. So I'll try my best. We had a really vibrant discussion, and if somebody from my session wants to jump in, please use the microphone there. All right, so the first thing that we discussed a lot was whether we want 2 types of test specification. One, which is shareable across the world and certifies that it's ORAN compliant. And second, operator additional requirement, so that you can say that this is operator compliant. Because an operator may have, let's say, 20% additional test cases that may not be covered by ORAN compliance tests. The second one is the minimal viable test profile. So for example, conformance is something every operator, every vendor should meet. But then there is, let's say, functionality test or security test. Security test, probably you have to meet most of it. But there may be additional requirement for different operators, different vendors. But what is that minimal viable test profile? And what is that common test suite for that profile that could be shared across the lab, across the world? The big pain point for some of our OT directors who participated in our session was that when you work with Keysight, then you have to work with Keysight test script. You have to train your people to work with them. And if you want to work with VRV, then you have to do the same, which is a lot of overhead. So can we start a collaboration between different test vendors so that whatever the implementation is, at the logical level, they are able to run the same test cases? Then we had a discussion on common criteria for test passing or failing across the labs. The other one we had was we need identical, if not possible identical, at least similar test bed configuration and network emulation. So the idea is that except the device under test, whether it's ODU, whether it's OCU or ORU, keep rest of the test bed, network emulation, environment, load, user behavior, similar across different labs. It may be customizable for different, let's say, we had a discussion on Japan, for example. It's a very different setup with earthquakes and all that. So those things you can take care later, but at least for general common test suite that we have to have identical test bed. So a gentleman yesterday presented that even the cable length plays a role in testing results. The other big point was brought up was, can OTIC serve as the system integrator for a specific operators? Like for example, if a certain operator wants to work with a particular DU vendor and a particular RU vendor, then can the OTIC make that happen? Not just for operator, even for a vendor, if the vendor wants to work with different vendors for different operators. Then we had an idea on review meetings across OTIC labs so that they can share their experience, they can share their test cases. But the question is who leads it, who manages it, who funds it, right? So there is an interesting point there. And the last point I would like to bring up is standardize the O&M best practices, which is FCAPS, automation, orchestration. So there should be some standard set of test cases which gives some confidence to the operator that it will work out. Thank you. Did I miss anything else? All right.
Okay, so the great summaries there. And in terms of key actions on next steps, you summarised very well some of the discussions and questions. What did you agree as a group as how you're going to take these things forward? So first of all, maybe to Maggie, and how are you going to then move forward with an action plan on these? How do you see the next steps working?
I think because during our discussion, we have some baseline, like what we are collaborating for now. And definitely we can, because during our discussion, we have some new friends like from Brazil. So we can definitely take this action item and we can expand our collaboration to from Brazil and other area.
Great. Same question, Vijay?
Well, we did not discuss that. But I guess all the important bullets we have, so we have to take actions on them. I don't know who would be the best person to lead it, but these are something we must address.
Yeah, that's definitely something I think we should address. I think one of the key things that we need to do is to ensure that we get everyone's contact details. And I think you raise a very valid question around all of these meetings that will require coordination from various organisations all across the world, and even time zones is going to be complicated. And as you say, who will fund that, and how does it actually take place? So I think that's probably a wider topic that we need to take up as a group. But I think the main thing is just to ensure that you get the contacts of the people that you are involved in the discussions and keep that engagement going. And then we can then probably across all of the breakout sessions and have a wider discussions across ourselves from Sonic and from ITRI and NTIA and I14Y Labs, who are, well, at least we know we really, really want to continue this collaboration and build upon it. Then we can look at how we can address and have this this wider engagement across all the organisations. So please do get people's contact details, and we'll take that forward as a next step.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're a little bit ahead of time. We've got 45 minutes for the 6 sessions, and we've just finished 1 and 2. So could we have the leads from breakout sessions 3 and 4, which is NK and Michelle? Okay, no. So starting with UNK, same thing really. What are the key things that you come out of your session in terms of agreements and way forward? Some of the key topics and questions, and then where do you go next?
Okay. So I put the notes in. You can all access the Google Docs. I'm reading from the same notes. So we had a small group and a very good discussion. Everybody got a chance to talk, and representation was from industrial companies, industry labs, industry forums, academia, and government. So we largely talked about 3 main topics. The first one was, so the question was, how can we progress consistent and repeatable testing by dividing the effort? So the first big question was, what do you mean by dividing the effort? What does that really mean? Is it possible? And we had some good answers. And the second big question was, different test labs are going to be different. So do we leverage, how can we best leverage the capabilities? And it ties into this theme, and I'll give you an interpretation of that. But just a quick look ahead. If you want the same test repeatable, that means you're suppressing the differences between labs and trying to force them to be similar. You'll reach a common denominator, but there'll be labs will always have some differentiating capabilities which could be leveraged for complementary reasons. And the third one was for the dynamics of the actual collaboration. So most of the points were on the first topic of dividing the effort. What does it really mean? So if it is repeatable and consistent testing, we made some fundamental assumptions that look that, and it's a point other people have said, the test plans and specifications are not there yet. They need to be better. They need to be explicit, no room for interpretation, so that we can achieve repeatable and consistent. And the test equipment is also important. If different equipment is used, validating the functionality. But some of the new interesting comments that came out is suppose you assume that we can achieve repeatable and consistent based on the test plans and specs are all good. An interesting comment was, why do you want to repeat? If you really did the job very well, then maybe you don't have to repeat. the same test because it's assumed. So my take on that is you have to repeat tests to validate that they're repeatable and consistent. But then once you have that level of confidence, maybe you can divide the effort by splitting the tasks. If you have confidence that different labs can produce the same results, then tasks could be split. So that's an interesting interpretation of dividing the efforts for repeatable and consistent testing is that once you've achieved repeatability, don't repeat because you don't have to and you could achieve more. The other interpretation of this is, so repeatable would be a lab 1 runs the same test as lab 2 under the same condition gets the same results. But complementary cooperation on dividing the effort would be once you know the labs are all good, so we're thinking about that lab 1 will run a different set of tasks or scenario as lab 2. Maybe because they're sharing the burden, maybe because they can do something unique. And you can have labs 1, 2, 3, and 1 and 2 are equivalent in one way, and 1 and 3 are complementary in some way. I think we should think about these things. The cooperation between labs, for example, could also be the capabilities of the labs. And so including tests run, somebody had mentioned this in the joint session, that you have a RIC, non-real-time RIC and SMO in one lab, which is using the RU setup in another lab. You might have advanced RUs with 64 by 64 MIMO, which could not be in every lab. So you can take advantage of test cases with cooperation between labs. So that was the first point. The second point is leveraging the capabilities of different test labs. And at this point was made, test labs will have some capabilities which have to be common, and some will be differentiating. But the geography will be different for one. There's a lot to do with the RAN and RF conditions, permissions, licenses to transmit in different frequencies, rural areas, urban areas. And so there was a comment about a matrix of different types of labs and test areas. And so if we do this collectively right, we can actually leverage the differentiating capabilities instead of just suppressing the different capabilities. The third point was the actual dynamics of how this collaboration happened. So I just raised a question, is there enough of a forum for all the labs to actually discuss how they're going to divide the tasks? Will it be done as part of ORAN meetings? Is it ORAN TIFG? And we have representatives from the TIP forum. So the comments were made that the ORAN OTICs were set up as independent labs. And now we're talking about how they exactly would maybe collaborate. Comment was made that in the TIP forum, for example, they were set up under a central authority. And so some of this dynamics of sharing was more explicit. So as we think about for this forum as a whole, if labs are to collaborate, if we don't have enough of a forum, then we should think about where exactly are they going to have these agreements to divide the tasks. Thank you.
Thank you. So for breakout session number 4, we had a very focused discussion on the starting point was the question, how can existing labs provide training and workforce development to new labs? And we came out with 2 main conclusions. So the first one is that it is impractical for existing labs to train new labs for business and competitiveness reasons. And we recognize the role that to bring up a new lab, we recognize the role that test vendors have in providing training for their specific equipment and specifically for the lab bring up. Then we took a kind of a broader view, and we started discussing about workforce development in general. And we recognize that workforce development is probably the more practical approach toward training people that know ORAN, know how to do testing in ORAN and related topics. And also define possible multiple steps and stages for this kind of workforce development, where the first one will be in academic programs, primarily masters, where there is a need to align curricula to new developments in wireless and networks. offering a combination of, we identified 6 main areas, so wireless, RF hardware and embedded engineering, system engineering, cybersecurity, IT and operational networking, AI and ML, software engineering, and QA. So we see these as ingredients that a good OTIC engineer would have, but also the need to provide cross-functional training on the specific applied science domain that we're talking about. So the overall provide a system level view on what does it mean to test or run systems. Then out of higher ed education, industry certification or recertification on these programs is something that can be useful to train a general workforce, and also hands-on training. So these were the 2 main points that we decided to capture in these notes to be concise. But we wrote down a bunch of notes on the legal pads, and we put photos. I put a link to some photos that I took of the notes. So they're in the shared document. Thanks.
Thank you. And in terms of actions to take this forward, starting with work stream 3, what's the key way forward on developing these actions into real programs of delivery?
So one action in some sense was the ensuring that the test plans and specifications are mature enough and explicit enough. Otherwise, it would be difficult to achieve this repeatable and consistent testing. The other one would be to the extent that if there's consensus that leveraging the differentiating capabilities of different labs and figuring out which ones are suitable for what, if there is consensus and that makes sense, then the action would be for some agency or some organization to try to figure out which labs fit where, and then have a process for the labs to sort of feel comfortable and have trust to decide where they fit in the ecosystem.
And on the education part, I think the main action items are defining and aligning curricula to the actual needs of the community, as well as identifying which are the best suited industry certification programs that could bring something like this forward.
Thank you. Anything to add? No. So from my point of view, I think there's quite a lot of material in there that we couldn't do justice in terms of a real discussion here now. But I think what I think is emerging from these 4 breakout discussions is that we really need to document, which I'm sure you have, the agreements and actions, and then we need to then look at how we prioritize them and take them forward. So what's your thoughts, Maggie? Yeah. We'll come on to those as well. So yeah, thanks for your time. Thank you. Thank you. And next, we have leads for work streams, breakout sessions 5 and 6. That's Tracy and Syed. Please, if you could join us here on the stage.
Oops.
I got it. Thank you.
So please, if you could just summarize for us, Tracy.
So we had a breakout session 5, what labs are willing to share. It was very easy for us to say, okay, we are willing to share open source. We collaborate and share already open industry standards. Data is a touchy subject, but in general, there is this willingness to share. And it was a pretty lively discussion with mobile network operators, the big 5G suppliers, public research teams, academics. And first thing we recognized was The ORAN Alliance is truly foundational, but not sufficient. So most of the labs that we talked about are OTICs or are going to be OTICs, and we said, but they're OTICs plus plus. Quite a few of these OTICs are built on mature, indoor-outdoor, city-scale, mobile and fixed wireless test beds. They already have a focus area or a center of excellence, and they're getting augmented thanks to the generosity of NTIA, Public Wireless Supply Chain Innovation Fund. So, OTICs, great, building upon it, not sufficient. ORAN Alliance specifications. I think we've heard from several rapporteurs that there's ambiguity. My favorite word for most of these specifications, with the exception of open frontal, is they're still underspecified. Likewise, the test specifications, great work, but I'm with AT&T. I was sitting next to my colleague with Verizon. We're real serious about having a framework that allows, whether it's AT&T and Verizon or mobile wireless operators anywhere, to bring in Open RAN technologies to insert into our existing networks with confidence and not having to retest it ourselves. That means we need to work on the test specifications. Lastly, we talked about, what we've already talked about, there's co-opetition. We are going to cooperate and we're going to compete. The point was made that an intense amount of, really, great investment of time and effort on the part of experts in, doing things in the lab and not getting paid for it. So the point was made that we are very much committed to commercializing, and not only commercializing, but once open source code base with open data information models and other artifacts are commercialized, a vendor partner in place to maintain it, keep it aligned, and grow it, because it's not one and done.
Thank you. And over to you, Syed, if you'd like to summarize for us there.
Sure, yeah. Actually, I'm looking at right now, Professor Hussain took some really good notes. If you look at the details, and we had a really nice small group, about 20 people probably in a room that are cozy and it was lively. So it says security collaboration, current progress and next steps. I think the next step is really, we need to have a workshop because everybody had something to say and there are a lot of questions still. We need to spend some more time to really do justice to it. But let me at least try to cover, and thank you those of you who joined us. I thought one of the really, I run a lot of sessions all over the country and this was really lively and really useful, so thank you for that. The main things I would say is that, so I think we started a very good question then. Doug from NIST, what is security testing, right? What is it? And that tells us that we have some work to do. We had some good discussion, but in my head, and again, you can see the notes, there are 12 questions that Syed put in. But at the highest level, we need to decompose the problem. What do you mean by security testing of Open RAN? And so the highest decomposition is that what is, it's mostly software, right? So what are the common problems that any software can have? And then we go into software quality. And that breaks down it. There's good discussion on SBOMs that, right, it was started by NTIA, now it is CISA. And there are two different databases, that one NTIA and VD, and then CISA's are the ones that are actually exploited. So those bases for any software that you write, and so that decomposition helps because then you can leverage all of the mechanisms that are there to address software quality and the security of the software itself, such as buffer overflow and execution time errors and all of that. We don't need a separate effort, at least part of this collaboration, to address that as such. So we need to leverage that. Then we come over to the other specific to 5G, right? There is a good decomposition because, as you know, the 3GPP actually have plenty of security specifications and verification specifications that are called SCAS for one for each CUDU because that decomposition was done in 3GPP itself, right? It's not Open RAN added the openness of the RU interface, but the decomposition of CUDU RU is part of 3GPP, and they have actually specifications that addresses each unit by itself and all the interfaces. So all of that, again, we can think of it as that's a separate decomposition that, again, utilize 5G based, whether it is Open RAN or not, based security efforts that are going on it. Then it leaves us the part what is new in Open RAN, and there, of course, is as you all know, the new interfaces, in addition to 3GPP, are all RIG based, right? And of course, there are a few others. But the primary ones are RIG-based, and as you know, when you add an interface, then there is. Now then there is actually, as most of you know, WG11 is doing great. I think I checked their newest editions. They are detailed security specifications, threat models, and again, they'll need some improvements, but I mean, they're awesome to begin with, right? They're there. So we can refer to those to begin with and look at all of the things that can be done by each vendor, but then the last layer, so that is, and in fact, even the RIG itself, then you have accepts and RFs. So that adds under security attack area possibly, and within that, then you even have what is called the conflict management, right? Because accepts and RFs, accept security by itself, RF security by itself, and then the possible conflict among accepts or RFs. Those are new areas that, I mean, again, the working group 11 is starting to address them, and those are good starting points. But we need to have more discussions on what could be collaborations in those areas and what could be the starting point, right? So now in addition to that, there's another layer, right? So which is the user security, primarily the privacy and data integrity and all that. And the specs will address some of that, but it won't address all of them in the sense that when it is out in the field, then what about the attacks that can happen from a third party or an untrusted operator on the device itself, right, or the owner. So that's actually has been addressed in 5G to a large extent by OUSD, 5G, DoD OUSD effort, and that we can look at what was done there to get a good understanding of what we can apply here as well with our architecture of RIG and so forth. And I think so that brings us to the point of red teaming, right? So red teaming, I think, is essential for particularly so for making secure deployment and security of the users of the Open RAN systems. And there we have two levels also, right? One is the mission critical communication, such as DoDs, and that is used in in critical infrastructure. They will require some more in addition to the vanilla flavor of security, which is also very important for when ordinary subscribers, not ordinary, but subscribers are using for normal, non-war or non-mission critical communication. So again, I invite you to look at that link is at the page, right? You can go there. There are 12 issues. We'll harmonize them so you can look at them at any time. I think you'll see a better and better version as we go ahead. So, but again, hey, thanks a lot. Did you have any quick questions or anything that I can address right now?
Yeah, actually, I was going to say that if I was to summarize how things have gone today, there was some really, really good points raised in the initial Q&A session, and some of those questions were discussed and developed further in the breakout sessions. It's very clear, I can even see from your notes there's a lot of material captured during these breakout sessions. And I really don't think we could do it justice in what time we have remaining, which is 10 minutes. So from my point of view, I think the main thing is to collect this information and decide on next steps. But I would like to perhaps use the time left to open it to the floor to give some feedback from everyone that attended the breakout sessions. And Maggie, I'm just wondering if there's anything else you'd like to add on next steps?
Yeah, as Paul just mentioned, that first of all, thank you for all the leaders and colleagues for this 6 breakout section, and all the summary will be updated on the Google Sheet that NTI ITS provided via the website. And I think we still have some more breakout discussion this afternoon and tomorrow. And at the end of tomorrow, there will be a final discussion on how we can work together. So maybe during this time, people can still think about what are the topics that we would really want to work with someone else. And we all have the contact information shared by the NTIA. So it's easy for all of us to find out the people that we like to connect with.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, like, there are 3 or 4 things that you'd like me to bring back to policy to report out on these sessions, things that I can report out. That would be very helpful, because I have to go at the end of the session, or at the end of the day, to the policy group.
Okay, so the policy team, I think, have got quite a strong linkage to funding, and it's pretty clear that the policymakers who fund many of these projects, I think it's clear that we need to have assistance in how we coordinate really bringing these topics forward. And as someone mentioned on one of the breakout summaries earlier, this may well be in addition to some of the work that is funded by their policymakers and project funders. And so that it's, I think, for me, I think one key thing to take, Julie, is to understand how can we collectively, as organisations, take this forward. We can work on the detail in terms of the technical content coordination, and I'm sure that we'll make great progress on developing common approaches to test cases, etc. But in terms of how that is going to be done at an organisational level, impacting perhaps, as someone said, feedback on standards, etc., this is really something that needs to be taken to a higher level to the policymakers. And the most basic thing is how can these things be incorporated into existing and ongoing projects in terms of scope, because that might require what's called change requests or scope changes. I mean, it's very clear that we need to do these things, but it's not within your scope to coordinate and engage internationally on those activities. So for me, it's getting support and guidance on how we take that forward is a key thing.
And you don't even have to upload it to policy. You can just say, these are the things we've identified as a technical community that we need to work on just to inform the policy. So don't be thinking.
So Julie, one thing we concluded in breakout session 5, and when you said change request, is take some of the learnings from this time together and formulate change requests for ORAN Alliance, which we're in the process of doing change request against, working group, not against, but to improve the specifications from working groups 5 and 10. Change requests to get, machine readable output in addition to the summary reports that we get from the testing and integration focus group. Change requests to, shift the focus a little bit to some of the more sophisticated end-to-end performance tests. And I would think that a lot of these change requests, should come from the people who are gathered here, all of whom are looking to, again, build on and succeed with the ORAN Alliance vision, the next best thing from 3GPP, and overcome some of the obstacles that have slowed us down incredibly. And we all know what those are. So.
I'm supposed to repeat my question. Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to repeat my question with the microphone on. And for the virtual, oh, there we go, for the virtual people. So my question is just basically what sort of 3 or 4 next steps that we've come up with so that I can share with the policy people? You don't have to up-level it to funding or policy or anything like that, but what sort of 3 or 4 things did we come out of the session that we can do going forward?
So can I add the 4th thing? So I think we had some good inputs already, but I would say that there is great value to be had to look at, continue the discussion we had here to kind of identify what specifically this Open RAN community should be looking at to do security collaboration on. And specifically for the mission critical communications, because if we identify that, then the subset of the non-mission critical communication will, drop out from there. And I think we do need to look at the mission critical from government user perspective.
So from my point of view, it's absolutely clear across all of the topics that we've discussed today is a common approaches to everything is associated with testing ORAN equipment, and that is agreeing on standard test cases, making sure that results are repeatable. You take that test case in one lab and it can be repeatable in another lab. So it's absolutely essential that we work together as a community to develop these common test cases that, for example, what I'd really like to get to is for example, a working group comes up with developing common test cases, and then it's actually testing if that test case is evaluated by another working group. So you actually take it and say, okay, you've given me a test case. Can I implement it in my lab, and then can I repeat it and get a similar result? That would be an ideal outcome of this collaboration activity. So standardized, prioritized test cases across all areas of ORAN test and evaluation.
Hi, this is Ku from Keysight. Maybe speaking on behalf of ORAN Alliance, TFG as well, I'm wondering whether if from this forum, this event, is there a plan to compile like reports or outcomes in terms of like these are the key areas, and perhaps I think not even a liaison statement or something like that. I'm pretty sure that many organizations, including ORAN Alliance, will be interested in the outcomes in terms of like these are the areas, feedback from the industry, and then looking at which are the areas that potentially ORAN will be able to handle versus other organizations, just so that those are actionable. And we know from the feedback, like for example, there are always liaison statements being sent to 3GPP, right? And obviously ORAN Alliance would have those as well. And then ORAN Alliance will be able to respond officially in terms of like which are the areas that we'll be able to tackle either within the current set of work plans or, future work items that needs to be looked at. And then this forum, again, there's going to be continuation into the second, third, and all those things. I'm pretty sure that there's going to be work in between that we can try to look at treating the feedback coming from different organizations and looking at holistically what needs to be addressed where. I think that could be one thing that, and I think from a test integration focus group perspective, myself, I've actually learned a lot from the team. Personally, I think from an industry perspective, TFG would be, obviously right now tasked to handle this feedback from the industry and look at what we'll be able to do realistically based on what the current set of work that we have and, what we need to be able to extend into the future. Thank you.
If you're volunteering, as well as Ian Wong as TIFG chairs, I would love to work with you after the seminar to come up with some ideas we could feed back to ORAN Alliance. That would be great.
Can you talk briefly about the document or the action items?
Do you want to? Okay, so yeah, what we're planning to do is combine all of the items and kind of up-level them. And then what we'd like to do is have some near-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. And as you mentioned, Ku, we're going to plan to do these on a yearly basis, the symposium. But between the symposium, we'd like to have other smaller groups meeting every month or two and see where we are and what actual realization of our action steps we're making. So yes, if other organizations like ORAN Alliance or TIP or 3GPP can help with that, that's great. But also people within these workshops will also be working on figuring out the best path forward. Does that make sense?
And I got to say that before I stood up here to provide my recommendation, knowing Julie, I'm willing to obviously work together with you because I know that will come back, right? But jokes aside, from a co-chair perspective, from an industry kind of partnership perspective, that's something that we'd definitely be happy to work with yourself. I'm pretty sure that Yen would agree as well, right? So let's try to work together on a plan. And I think we can even consider using some of the ORAN Alliance face-to-face meeting as a checkpoint meeting for the industry to get together. I'm pretty sure that most of the team members here are basically members of ORAN Alliance. So let's try to work together on formulating a plan that maybe we can present tomorrow to the team. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're just about on time, yeah?
Yeah, any last thoughts, but yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, just like to thank everyone for their contribution today. It's very clear that we've got a lot of discussion, questions captured, which will be rationalised into, and as Julie suggested, into near term, mid-term and long-term action plans, which will then be, I would suggest, that will be published, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, very good discussion and a great foundation on how we take these topics forward. So thank you all for participating today.
Okay, can we thank our group here and all the breakout session leaders? All right, thank you very much. I am the only thing standing between you and food. To the virtual audience, thank you for tuning in. We are going to break and we will come back with you at 1:15.